cool seat because they're cool, or they've done cool things, or they've got interesting things to say. The person that you're about to hear from actually was on the show last week and was so interesting that we thought we'd got to get him back. Tim Ashton is a farmer. He lives in Sultan Hall near Wem. He's doing some very exciting things as part of his estate, one of which is happening tonight and tomorrow, but we'll come on to that a bit later on. Tim Ashton, thank you for being in the cool seat today.
Hi, good morning.
Lifelong farmer, how did you come to Sultan Hall?
Oh, my family have been here a while. My dad, John, and mum, Anne, have been farming here since the 60s, and my grandpa did before that. That's how I came to be here.
Tell us about Sultan Hall and the estate. What is there, and what do you do with it?
Well, I guess if you're coming at that from a historic point of view, it's a fairly historic place. The manor is recorded in 1017. And we've had some archaeological digs here over the last couple of years. I think we can't remember whether we spoke to Radio Shropshire about those, and unfortunately one of those had to be cancelled, but that was to excavate probably an illegal castle from 1135. And then obviously there's the farming, bit of woodland, weddings, and accidentally in the last few weeks quite a bit of theatre outside.
But there've been people living and doing what you do on the spot where you live and do what you do for 1,000 years. Yes,
but wow. I guess that Shropshire's full of history, isn't it? So it just happens to be recorded here.
You take an interesting approach to farming. You use a no-till method. For people who've not come across this before, tell us about no-till farming.
So other words for that are regenerative farming or conservation agriculture, and it's about putting carbon back into the soil and trying to have a bit more understanding of the biology of the soils, which are fairly complicated. Like a teaspoon of soil has 7 billion organisms in it, and earthworms are incredibly important sort of ecosystem engineers down there. And when we approach soils in a very mechanical way with tillage operations, we do a lot more damage. I think was appreciated, and even until quite recently.
Is it organic, or does it not necessarily have to be organic?
No, it's not organic. There are a few things that we're balancing when we make decisions on farms, and sometimes, I mean, this is controversial. I don't want you to get lots of letters, but
that's okay.
but sometimes you might say that some of the crop protection chemistry we have available to us now is potentially less damaging to the ecology of the soils than a ploughing operation can be.
Right. So, and is it more efficient? Does it mean there are some things that you have to grow in a different way, or what?
Well, the soils can take a while to adjust because they could have there's a farmer called David Woolston who's farming over in the eastern side of the country, who says that the repairs of soils, it's surprisingly quick. But actually, in some ways, we haven't really noticed exactly what's happened to soils because the degradation of them has been slow. If that makes sense for you.
Yes. Yeah. Moving away from the agriculture itself, something that I remember I was talking to you about a while ago is the long barrow that you've built. Long barrow is something that dates back thousands of years. It's been a long time since anyone built a new one. What led you to build a long barrow?
I built that. I was inspired by my friend Tim Dorr, who farms in Wiltshire, and he spent, alongside his farming, he was a steward for Stonehenge for a long time. And that landscape is absolutely saturated with prehistoric monuments. If you ever drive over the Gallops, but Stonehenge isn't just one sort of event in the landscape; it's hundreds of acres of people building monuments over thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And before Stonehenge was built, so Stonehenge is about a bit over 3,000 years old. But they were building monuments 2,000 years before even that, and the first ones were long barrows. My friend was in the pub, and people suggested reviving the practice of building a long barrow, and he said yes, because it was in the pub. And then he then thought he'd get stopped at planning or something and wouldn't have to do it. But in the end, the planning went through and he built it. And it was a runaway success. People love it locally. It's sort of on their calendars and tea towels. It's part of their identity down there. And it's very beautiful. And when I was a boy, we used to have holidays in Anglesey, which is, again, covered in these ancient monuments. And we used to holiday right next to one of the more famous ones in Anglesey. And then I saw what Tim had done, and I thought we would have to bring it to Shropshire. So the same masons team, Sacred Stones, came here. And 5 years later, we were about to finish the project of bringing one to Shropshire.
And a long barrow it's a burial place, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, functionally, that is one of the things it does. I think the longer we have it on the farm here, the more we're beginning to realise it's got quite a few other cultural things it's doing, which I suspect the original ones were doing. They're just a focus for community. But yes, it is sort of, yeah. I mean, the most obvious thing it's doing is storing cremation ashes, the urns, which our rituals are kind of quite post end of Second World War vision of the future at the moment. We haven't really caught up with doing something beautiful and meaningful. People don't go to crematoriums on anniversaries and things. They're not places that people tend. I mean, not being disrespectful to that, but there is space to do something more beautiful and meaningful. And I think people who are using the barrow are finding that, and they're also finding, because it's lined up with the sunrise on the winter solstice and the summer solstice, there's a kind of support network and other things. It's very informal, but the monument kind of drives that itself, because people are open to having conversations there that you would normally find quite difficult to instigate, and they know that they have somewhere special that they can go and be alone with their thoughts, or if it's a day where it's having an open day, or it's like this weekend, the focus a bit of cultural activity, then they've got that in their diary, I suppose.
You put a lot of research into the Long Barrow project, which including going and seeing loads more.
I did. I went to go and see a lot of them, and Cambridge University, Chris Evans, who refounded the archaeology department at Cambridge University, helped me understand what I was trying to do, and Professor Mary Louise Sorensen was also very supportive. And then, yes, I think we visited probably about 30 of these monuments, but they were all over the country. And there would have been many, many more of them than there are now, because over the years, development and change of land use and things have ripped them out. But if you remember, a couple of summers ago, we had an amazingly intense drought, and all these monuments were coming out all over the country. And the two that survive in Shropshire that I can think of are Mitchell's Fold. There's a stone circle there. And the Devil's Ring and Finger near Market Drayton is another. I think both of those are Neolithic, which is late Stone Age.
Yeah. So a long barrow, but you mentioned that that one of your friends is like custodian of an area around Stonehenge, and the idea of a henge has occurred to you as well. Tell me more about that.
Oh, right. Well, these things, once you start, they kind of develop their own momentum, and you're almost a bit of a spectator to the thing that you're kind of involved in, if that doesn't sound too weird. Certainly, when we come onto the theatre stuff, that's definitely how things have felt in the last couple of days. But we've got to move quite a bit of soil to complete the monument, and I was kind of uncomfortable about just getting sort of ice cream scoops of ponds around everywhere. We were just making existing ponds a bit bigger to get more soil. And then, so we'll be getting another couple of 100 tons of soil, I think, to finish the barrow. And I thought we could make a statement there and put a couple more standing stones up in a place where we could say something. And then got really self-conscious about what we would say, and people kicking the tires at it and thinking, we didn't know what we were doing. So I got a professor of physics at Oxford to help design it. And I think the respectful way of engaging with the traditions from the Bronze Age and the Stone Age, when they were monumentalizing their understanding of the landscape and the cosmos, is to kind of do the same thing, but in the 21st century. So he's hoping to design something that will point at the nearest black hole. So you can kind of introduce somebody to that idea by some stones in a field, and also some stuff on quantum physics, subatomic physics, which is probably a lot to get into in your interview just now. But I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing physics that Einstein said it was sort of spooky. But it's not that hard to get your head around it. But it's not a conversation you normally have permission to have with people because it's a bit geeky. But it belongs to all of us. So that's what Professor Hoffman's trying to do here with that.
And as you say, that's what they were doing 5,000 years ago. They were putting into monument form what they knew, what they understood about their world and about the universe. And we understand more now, but the opportunity to put that into monument form is still there.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly effective way of communicating, isn't it? I mean, they almost certainly weren't speaking English 5,000 years ago. We don't share a great deal with those people, but they had an idea and they pointed at it, and we can still sort of decode it. And it's quite a magical kind of high five through time, I think.
Oh, what a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, high five through time. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Tim Ashton is in the call seat of Sultan Hall, is in the call seat here at BBC Radio Shropshire today. We spoke to you last week because of something that's happening in the Sanctuary, your newly built amphitheatre, tonight and tomorrow. Just remind us about the National Youth Theatre's visit, and you mentioned that you felt like a bit of a spectator in it all over the last couple of days. How's the run-up to it been?
Well, the run-up to it's been amazing. It's a bunch of... so the NYT, I will quickly say, National Youth Theatre is the national company that, a charity that brings on young talent in acting. And before I say any more, you probably don't need me to say that there's been enormous difficulties for live performance. And it's an incredibly important part of our economy, actually, from, gigs for bands just starting out to comedy sets to theatre. All of that's stopped at the moment. And we have to, those of us who are not talented in that line, like me, can't support them by buying tickets in the way that we might want to. And we have to be imaginative about how we can get behind these guys. And also, it's just an important comment on who we are as a culture if we can't look after sort of these aspects of like civic life. It's saying something about us. So we need to be imaginative, I think, as a community to support those people, an important part of our economy. Internationally, we're really good at this stuff, so we need to look after that industry. We came up with the idea of building this theatre space, and they're bringing a brand new work, which has been written by the cast, who are all under 25. It's promenade theatre, so the audience will walk through the landscape, and then the action will be going on right around them, which is a style of theatre which it's not normal to get in Shropshire, but certainly, you can experience that in London where people take over whole buildings and do that. So we're very privileged to get the NYT back on their feet for the first time since the lockdown, doing brand new work, the sort of stuff you'd normally have to make a 300-mile trip from Shropshire to see is right here this week.
And one of the things that we were speaking to Peter Rosebery from NYT last week, and he said that they at that stage they still hadn't all got together in one space and done it. They must have now, because the first performance is tonight. What's it been like watching that happen around you?
Well, it's been amazing, and I think they've been saying that there's an amazing kind of synergy between agriculture and parts of theatre, and this is where I feel like a spectator in my own life, because you get a bit of set design has had to happen here, and we've sort of stacked some IBCs. The play is set in the future, so it starts 100 years into the future from now, where climate change hasn't been tackled, and then it goes back through time to another scene in 2050, and then one scene in 2020, and that's walk through the farm. And then the scene in 2050 is quite dystopian, so we had to stack up junk from the farm to make a sort of quite grungy kind of scene for them, which was quite fun. And it looks pretty spectacular, I think, the whole thing. So I'm afraid anybody listening, they can go on a reserve list, but it is sold out now. There's only two days worth of performance because of COVID, and also how it's been thought about. There's only 80 tickets per day. So the guys who are coming, I hope they enjoy it. It looks spectacular. The lighting is amazing. The sound is amazing, and it's like completely surrounding you. So it's a wonderful experience, but really emotional for the NYT guys to be back working together. They've been saying that. And the other thing they've been noticing is a lot of them are freelance. So in many cases, the first time they've had any money from what they actually do and love and have trained for over 6 months now. So anybody who's bought a ticket is doing a wonderful thing, getting young people, encouraging them to go into that industry and supporting the performance, which itself is it's a bigger statement than the piece of drama that's going on tonight.
Yeah.
It's wondering hard whether we can do a lot of this next year, not just here on this farm, but across the county and the country. We can be a bit creative, and we could next summer have an amazing, really gilded summer that everyone looks back on very fondly because we were imaginative instead of being completely confounded by what we've all been facing for the last 9 months now.
That would be fantastic. That would be, and you're saluting the people who bought tickets for enabling this to happen. Everyone in turn is saluting you for making it for actually having a venue and making this and being so determined to make this happen. How does it feel for you having this happen in your place?
I don't really want to think about it like that. It's just a sort of civic responsibility. We are in an emergency, if you want to call it that. And if you've got the right shaped shoulders to lean in and help on one thing, then you should. And that's all that's happened, really. And Reverend Deborah and Reverend Nick from WEM and priests are looking quite closely at this because obviously we're coming towards Christmas. And we need to try and find a way of that working so that people can be together. And farms just have the space and the infrastructure to let that happen in a different way. And Reverend Deborah was certainly saying that she was kind of fed up with just putting a spare tire on and limping home with doing things that weren't quite, it was kind of a pale imitation of what we're used to. And we need to be a bit more imaginative and do something that is actually just worthwhile and good. And we might be prepared to, even when things go back to normal, just remember that was great and we'd like to do it again because it was a good thing in its own right, not a sort of a thing on crutches, just getting us
getting us there. Something actually that's worthwhile and inspiring, and exactly.
Yeah, so that's I can't say too much more about it, and that's obviously not restricted to, but the focus on that is our local community.
Yeah, cool.
Which is it's if you're 7 and Christmas is substantially cancelled in the normal way, then I think those of us who aren't, who've had the privilege of seeing a few more Christmases than that, need to think about how we can do something that holds us all together. And people really, with what we're all going through, I've been noticing that from the audiences as much as from the cast, but being able to put a red circle on a date in the calendar and have something to look forward to is making a big difference to how people... I'm sounding like an enormous thespian here. I'm not really. I only played a snowflake in the Nativity and the fourth wall of Jericho, and I was never picked for anything. That's not bearing a grudge all these years later. I'm just saying it's not really a world. I've just noticed how important it has been.
Yes, exactly.
And how valuable the work that these guys actually do for people is. And I think Reverend Deborah tweeted out today that she felt like a child again and so excited and just didn't care if it was going to rain today because it was something that's going to make a difference for her. So, oddly magical experience being involved in the middle of this. Surreal, but quite a lot of fun and feels more important than I ever thought it might.
I could listen to you talk about this stuff all day. Tim Ashton, it's been, once again, really inspiring talking to you. Thank you so much for being in the cool seat on BBC Radio Shropshire today. Tim,